Good morning, guys. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking some time out on Saturday morning to be here. And I would like to thank Azilian Technologies Management to help us out to hosting this event. So thank you. I have a lot of familiar faces, and it seems like I am back to the place where I belong to. I've learned a lot of things from here. So thank you, Azilian, for having me here earlier as well, and like today as well. Thank you so much. So now, before we move ahead, right? Can we have can we do some small exercise before we move ahead? Yes, no? Yes? I'm not seeing the energy. Yes? Great. So can I request everyone to please stand up on their places? You guys can roam around and you just have to give an high five and say you are awesome. You have to just roam around and say you are awesome. You are awesome. Great. Can anyone say that why we have done this exercise? Can anyone please explain why we have done this exercise? No one? Sorry? Okay, but still there is something more behind that. Anyone? Okay. So the reason why we have done this exercise, like, we rarely appreciate each other, right? And when it comes to criticizing, we are always open. But when we wanted to appreciate each other's, we are always shy away, like we are not open for such things. So I wanted to appreciate each one of you to taking some time out on Saturday morning, leaving your family things aside and coming here and probably learning something new out of it or maybe contributing to the community, right? So myself, Karthik Dokai, I would request everyone to please have a seat. Thank you so much. So I'll just introduce myself, and after that I have my volunteer of Agile Network India, Vikas Jain, with me, and he would be taking up the introduction slide of Agile Network India. But myself, Karthik Dokai, I'm having 13 years of experience now, and being into Agile for more than 2 years, I've learned a lot of things, and after that, like, I was able to present myself over here. So Agile has played a good role in my life to groom me and to help me out to where I am as of now. So thank you. And thank you so much. So I would request Vikas to please come down and take up a introduction slide of Agile Network India.
Thank you, Karthik. Thanks for energizing people. So I'll quickly introduce what exactly Agile Network India is. It's basically a community. It is founded by just can you move to the next slide? Okay. So it's a community which is leading through leadership, and the idea of this community, the vision is to be a most respected learned platform, and this was found by DK Patak. DK Patak. He is a founder of Innovation Route. So Innovation Route happens to be our lifelong sponsor. You can move to the next slide. So the mission is to be most respectful, resourceful learning platform. And we are open for suggestions, volunteers, and anybody who want to speak, who want to contribute to a community can join us. There is no joining fees. All things are run volunteered, right? So the Agile Network India across Pan India. I mean, right from Chandigarh, we are placed in Chandigarh. We are in Chennai. We are in Noida. We are in Delhi. In Ahmedabad, we are based in Ahmedabad. We have a chapter. We have a chapter in Baroda. We have a chapter in Surat. Right. So we are always looking out for the speakers for Ahmedabad, even for Mumbai, Chennai. If you have volunteered enough and you want to present your cases, or anybody for who has learning Scrum want to share their learning, are most welcome out here. So Innovation Route is basically a Bangalore based and they are basically more into consulting, business consulting, technical consulting across. And the new sponsor we have is Bhuvan Pant. He is basically a business coach and he is another sponsor for us. And now this is something anybody from Agile and management needs to look into it, because we are trying to have a start 24 with a conference out first time in Ahmedabad on agility, and we are open for looking for sponsors. So those, anybody from Agile and management wants to sponsor, we are open for that. Just next. So the essence is learning can happen in many ways, right? If you look at Agile, people say it works for us, it didn't work for us, but nobody present their data. So idea of ANI is to use this data to have a solution so this learning can be more effective. Without data, I think ऐसा होता है, ऐसा हुआ है, मेरी किसी organization में ये काम नहीं किया. This all are fake. That doesn't mean if we don't have a data. So the idea is to have a learning which is more data driven. So this is all about Agile Network, and Agile Network India is going to have a conference in October, right? In Mumbai.
We are in December. We are
Okay.
actually planning to have a conference in December. Yeah, so we are actually, we usually have 4 conferences across India, across the year. Like in 1 year, we are having 4 conferences. The first conference we are going with Agile Mumbai, where I was a speaker last year. So Agile Mumbai, Agile Kolkata, Agile Chennai, and Agile Gurugram. So these are the 4 conferences which are actually having it across, like in October, November, and December. So probably we would be going in January or February. Agile Ahmedabad is planned for.
That will be first our Agile conference in Ahmedabad. So coming back, not taking much of a time, coming to today's session. So the session talks, 2 session talks. One is by Chintan, it's more on Agile, the mindset building and product. Then we have another expert talk by Dhaval. Dhaval is here. And this will be his all experience, he's going to put it into 45 minutes. Panel discussion, moderator is Karthik. Siddharaj, Sonia is on the way. And we already have a Janki out here. So I'd request Chintan.
So first of all, thank you Agile and Agile Network India for having this event, and thank you everyone for being here today. So I started my career as a developer around 18 years back, and over the period of 18 years I've had a lot of experiences, some with positive outcomes, some with not so positive outcomes. But I have learned from the not so positive outcomes, and I'd like to share some of the learnings today. The mindset, and we'll be focusing on the mindset that is really needed to build products and products that can scale. What I'll cover is waterfall and why it is considered to be one of the mistakes in the 70s and 80s, and my experience that I had with waterfall very early on in my career. Product success, what it means, and what is the Agile way. Agile principles around requirement gathering, around prototyping, around stakeholder collaboration. Growth, how growth brings uncertainty, and how do we adapt to growth. What is waste and how do we reduce it? How do we measure, after having said all that, how do we measure whether our team and the delivery unit is performing? And then what contributes to a high performing culture? I will take some questions at the end of the session, so in case any one of you have, please do note. We'll spend around 10 minutes taking. And then also during the break, we can network and meet and discuss any points. So very early on in my career, one of the projects that I was doing in Trivandrum, we were awarded the purchase order, we accepted, we did an internal kickoff. We went to the customer site for a 2 weeks requirement workshop. I traveled with a business analyst. We stayed there in a room full of people from different departments. So there was marketing, finance, there was sales, IT, of course. All the departments were there. We spend a lot of time, entire day, brainstorming on the requirements, capturing the requirements as the business users put across. At the end of the day, we used to go back to the hotel, try and map it to the product, identify what are the gaps, what we need to customize, what is out of the box available, what will require a completely new development. While doing that, towards the end of the second week, I had sleepless nights. There were around 150 requirements which did not map with the product that required completely new development. And 150 is a huge number. I'm sure you all must agree. We traveled back to our base location. We again went into a discussion internally with developers trying to estimate what kind of efforts this will need. What we came up with was a huge amount of effort. Even if you consider 1 day for a requirement, it would be more than 150 man days, which is like huge in a fixed cost project. So I went to my boss, I discussed it with him. He said, let's prioritize, let's get on a call with the customer, explain the situation, and see what is really required as P1 for the customer to launch, and then whether he's open to take some CRs. We went on a call with the customer, discussed with him, wanted to prioritize. The customer was not ready. Most of the requirements had come from finance, around auditing, around compliance, around reporting. And all of those requirements were really, really important for them. So then we were weighing our options. My boss did discuss this with senior management. And then they took a call to return this PO back to the customer. So he said, I'll take it on me. He traveled back to Trivandrum alone, went into a discussion with the customer, met a lot of stakeholders. His visit was planned for a day, but he stayed on for a week. While he was there, he had interactions with the different departments. And what came out was he came back returning that PO, returning a sales return. But then he also won another opportunity for us in a different department, network, which was on the OSS side. We did that project with a good amount of gross margin. Within 6 months, we went live, and the customer was happy. So what I took away from that was never to limit yourself, and more importantly, when you know that what part of the ecosystem your product is going to be, and you know things around that ecosystem, there is always opportunities to convert risks into a win-win situation. So coming to waterfall and why it is considered to be one of the mistakes. So Royce, when he proposed the waterfall, published the paper in 1970s. It was misunderstood by many across the world as being completely linear, where there was no way going back to the initial phase or the earlier phase. But then what he had proposed was a waterfall approach with at least a couple of iterations with feedback loops. And what he had proposed, which is on the right, was as a part of a risk he wanted to depict. People took it as the waterfall approach, and one of the reasons why only 10% of projects in 70s and 80s were successful. So talking about product success, how do you decide what approach to take, whether agile, waterfall, which is traditional, or lean? So when you have something to innovate or solve a problem, you usually go for lean, where you're looking for expertise to solve that problem, and what you adjust or vary is a schedule. You take waterfall. Let's take an example of you are trying to build your home. The budget is a constraint, the timeline is a constraint. So what you look for is predictability in terms of what is the schedule going to be. You need efficient contractors on ground to do the work within budget and in time. And what will adjust is the budget. Agile, so when you're looking for speed and you want a working product to be delivered quickly, you need to have trust of the customer, because what you're going to adjust is the technical scope. If the customer doesn't trust you, you will not be able to execute. Product success. So again, one of the instances, this is very early on in my career when I was a developer, part of a team. We were developing a product. It was a framework by a company called Rate Integration, called Price Maker, which was around charging and rating. In telecom, when you make calls, there are CDRs or call data records that are generated. you need to charge them. In that period, incoming, outgoing, everything was chargeable, not like today. So we built a product around rating and charging. We deployed it. It was a good project. We executed it successfully. One day, one of our team members came to me and said, our group manager is calling us. So we went to meet him. All 4 or 5 of us were there with the group manager, and he asked us a question. Do you think this product can rate or charge anything other than a telecom CDR? We were freshers. We did not have an answer. But then he asked us another question. He said, what we are charging is an event. A CDR is an event. Can it charge electricity? So we said, yes, it can. Can it charge water? We said, yes, it can. And then he said, we have an opportunity with one of the operators in Kuwait. Let's build a roaming product out of this. So we worked on that, developed a roaming product when the parent company of the product was itself marketing it as a telecom charging solution. So when vision, user centricity, and business centricity meet with a well-thought roadmap and a good flexible teams working on it with processes in place, what you really come out with is product success. Coming to the agile principles and the principles around requirement gathering, why it is important. So again, one of the experiences I had, while I was doing a project in Bangalore, this was a cable operator in Bangalore who wanted to launch fiber to home, FTTH. You all must have fiber at your home now. In those days, it used to be like a pilot project. They were launching in a couple of pin codes only in Bangalore. So again, we went there to the location, customer location. We had a lot of brainstorming exercises around requirements. What really struck me was this particular customer, every requirement that came to us or was discussed was only and only around user experience. There were no reporting requirements, there were no compliances, there were no audit requirements, there were no NFRs, only user experience. We spent a lot of time discussing, brainstorming, mapping the requirements with the product, identifying gaps, and stuff like that. But then the customer wanted to launch a pilot project, which meant there wasn't enough time. There was competition really catching up. There were big operators who were launching fiber to home in that period. So we decided to go ahead with an MVP. We broke down the requirements, we prioritized the requirements with the customer, what is really required as an MVP. We did create a lot of user stories using invest principles. We made small, independent, valuable user stories that could be independently tested. We did prioritization on those requirements, and then we really came up with an MVP and launched the customer services within 6 months. So, why requirement gathering is also very important is, that is the phase when most gaps can creep in to a project scope in terms of what the customer expects, what the teams are going to develop, and what the user is going to experience. One of the other examples, which I can give and which I have experienced is around prototyping and why prototyping is really important when you're making a product. We had an idea that came out of a hackathon. Some very junior team members had, come up with an idea, and it was called ANDSF. Just to simplify, what it means is, you have an application that is installed on your mobile. You, whenever you visit a hotspot, Wi-Fi hotspot, the user will be automatically switched to Wi-Fi. It aimed at solving one specific problem which operators have these days, and which is network congestion, bandwidth, and limited spectrum. So what would happen is, let's say I'm an Airtel user. I go to a hotspot or a mall, where there is Wi-Fi, Airtel Wi-Fi. As soon as I walk in, I switch onto the Airtel Wi-Fi. My data, I'll get good speed because I'm on Wi-Fi. I'm not on the congested network. My data, which is as an Airtel subscriber, the same data will be used to give me good speed and experience in that hotspot. So this idea had come out of an hackathon. This group of junior team members had come up with this idea. They built a prototype very quickly. It was funded, of course, internally. They built a prototype very quickly. One of the opportunities, the sales and pre-sales pitched it to a customer. And the customer really liked it because operators do face this problem very frequently. So what they did was they invested in our idea. This prototype, they gave us a lot of feedback. We iteratively built it. And then we could actually license it to the same customer. When I last heard, I think they had a plan of launching 1 lakh hotspots all around India. So the point is, building prototypes, extremely important, seeking feedback, refining the prototypes. What it really helps in is, it helps you to build a product where a lot of the code from the prototype can be reused in the actual build or the final product. The other principle around stakeholder collaboration, and this is one of the experiences with a negative outcome. So we were working on a project. We had completed phase 1. We had went live. The customer was really happy. We started working on requirements for phase 2. The requirements discussions were going on. Now in those days, we had to get the requirement document or the SRS signed from each department. So that would be finance, sales, marketing, IT, networks, all of them. So we have to literally go to them, ask them to sign the requirements. So all departments signed off the requirements by the end of the workshop, barring one, which was network. And they had their inhibitions in trying to sign off those requirements. They were very not ready, really. We asked them what is the reason. They said physical inventory is something that we need. It is not in the requirements. So we were taken aback. We said it is not in scope. And they said it is in the compliance. When we looked at the documents, the compliance document said fully compliant. And the scope document said out of scope. So we were in a fix. That project finally never took off. The phase 2 never happened. It went on hold, and it remains on hold. What I really learned from this is, when you are dealing with customers, you should not look at the short term. You should look at long term. This is not one project that you're going to do with a customer. You should not refer to contracts and go on negotiating, because that is not really going to achieve anything. Contracts and negotiations are the last resort, only in case of a dispute. So what you do is, ideally, include the customers and stakeholders early on, discuss and explain them the benefits of the product, include them in prioritizing, include them in all phases of the project life cycle. Ask for continuous feedback, and then collaborate even during the release process. So coming to growth and adaptability, with growth comes a lot of uncertainty. I'm sure you understand. An application that is going to be used by 2-3 users, when 1 million users start using it, a very small issue can be extrapolated into something very large, which can have a lot of business impact. So what does scalability mean? I think a lot of us, or a few of us, would not differentiate between performance and scalability. So when we talk about performance, it is response time of an application or a response time to user inputs. When you talk about scalability, it means how do you manage peak load, or how do you manage exceptional scenarios? Let's say a holiday, when there are a lot of people who are going to use WhatsApp. So that kind of peak load, whether the application will be able to manage, that is scalability. How do you go about planning for scalability when you're building a product? So I think to start with, you need to think about what are going to be the user projections, people who are going to use this product. Year 1, year 2, year 3, at least. What will be the sizing of the hardware or the cloud in terms of storage, CPU, memory? What will be your approach, whether it will be a monolithic architecture, whether you are going to scale up, whether you're going to scale out with a microservices-based architecture. As I said, any issue that is small or relatively insignificant can really turn out to be a nightmare if the scale is large. Product managers and project managers, when they work on planning and when they build sprint goals, they should really look at whether a particular feature needs to scale. And those should be mentioned as a part of the goal. Also, trade-offs, technical debts, features, what are to be taken when. I think these are important decisions that need to be made. Coming to waste. So what is waste? I consider any effort that is lost, any rework that is done, any kind of requirements that are misunderstood, these all lead to waste. So how do you avoid waste? You avoid building partial features which are not really going to be useful to the customer or the user. Avoid building features that are not really required or not part of the scope. Knowledge lost, relearning, people come and go. Utilization of people, how do you make sure that people with the right skills are utilized properly and effectively? Handoffs between teams. How do you avoid multitasking? A lot of developers, they have hundreds of tabs open, a lot of windows open. Are they really productive? I would, in my experience, say no. So avoid multitasking. Defects, how do you shift left? How do you make sure that those defects are fixed early and you do not bear the cost at the end of the project? How do you make sure that you have continuous code quality reviews? And how do you make sure that security aspect is not an afterthought, something that you do at the end of the project? How do you include the InfoSec team, the DevSecOps, right from the design phase? Continue to have them engaged during the development phase. And then, how do you ensure that it shifts left? As I said, the lack of clarity in requirements, how do you avoid that? And manual work. Any repetitive tasks, how can you automate? All these aspects, if not taken care, lead to waste. Waste of efforts, waste of time and schedule, and waste of budget. So having said all this, what is then also important to look at is how do you measure the performance of the teams that are working on a product development project, or how do you measure the performance of an organization in general? So there is research that goes on to say that velocity is not really the right input to measure the performance of a team in Agile. Velocity can be an input for planning, definitely. But then how do you measure performance? So the 4 KPIs that they have identified, and this is based on years of research, looking at organizations with high, medium, and low performing teams. Deployment frequency, how often do you deploy code into production? Lead time to changes, how much time does it take for a requirement that has come from the customer to go into production? MTTR, or mean time to restore. What is the mean time that the teams are taking to restore a service outage or something that is not working? And what is the change failure rate? Let's say you are pushing in 100 changes in a week. How many of them fail? So high performing team, when it comes to deployment frequency, they deploy on demand. It is not necessarily indicative of the fact that the system is not stable. It means the system and the process is much more stable when you deploy multiple times a day. What are the lead time to changes? When you can ship small changes into production, less than an hour. What are the mean time to restore? Less than an hour for a service outage or something that is not working or broken. Change failure rate, when out of 100 changes that you are pushing into production, only 15 of them or less are failing. And so on and so forth for medium and low performers. So having said all this, how does this lead to a high performing culture within the teams and organization? So when we talk of a high performing culture, there are two aspects that really impact the culture of an organization or the culture of a team or a unit. One is, of course, the processes from a management aspect, which I have not covered today. But more importantly, it is a continuous delivery model, that needs to be looked at. Whether you have version control for the application, for the system, for the configurations of environment, for your scripts that are going to build and deploy automatically. Do you have a proper version control in place? Do you have automated deployments? Do you have continuous integration? And this is one aspect that a lot of us still make mistakes. Something that I have seen in a couple of projects recently, where we've been able to really have this kind of continuous integration. What I mean by continuous integration is when developers work on feature branches for days and weeks, and then they try to integrate, they face a lot of challenges, a lot of effort is lost. By continuous integration, it means developers are working in trunks, in small chunk of code that they are integrating on a daily basis. How do you automate and how do you automate test cases that are reliable? What it means is when a team of developers runs an automated test suite, are they 100% confident that this will not break in production? That kind of test automation is required, which is reliable. Test data management. How do you have on-demand test data available for the team to test? Shift left on security, as I said, very important. It cannot be an afterthought. You cannot have the InfoSec or the DevSecOps, working on the security aspects at the end of the project or building the product. How do you shift it left? How do you engage them right from design to development to testing and then implementation? Loosely coupled architecture, and this is one aspect where if the teams are able to work independently in terms of design, development, testing, and then deploying it in production without dependencies on other teams, that is the kind of loosely coupled architecture that is required. How do you empower those teams to make decisions? Of course, that are monitored. And then proactive notification. When all these happens, we call it continuous delivery, which really impacts the delivery performance indicators that we saw in the previous slide. And that is when, it impacts the team culture as well. There will be less deployment pain for the teams that are working. So the research has found that people working in such teams and working with this kind of a methodology, they identify themselves with the work they have done, the team they are working in, and also the organization that they are a part of, which really leads to an organization performance, a high-performing culture. So I think that would be it in terms of presentation and what I wanted to share. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take.
So when you conveyed that it's a kind of a waste, right? Can we call it like it's a learning instead of waste? Because I do understand that we lose something, but eventually the things which is done purposefully is waste for me. I have this difference of opinion over here, but you can share your opinion. Like, how can we actually convert like learnings into waste? Because like both are going hand in hand.
Yeah, right. I think Agile is not about continuous improvement. It is about learning, taking feedback, and iteratively improving. So definitely, I think rather than calling it waste, calling it learning would be apt and appropriate.
Hi Chintan, this is Maulik,
Hi, Maulik.
from InfoChips. I have one question on the same front, which even Karthik has covered on the waste. So you more of try to put it down that when we say it's waste, multitasking is not necessary. But in the industry level, that's on demand, okay? In the context of if someone from the DevOps team need to deliver the task as well as need to maintain the product availability or product stability. So as you rightly pointed out on the next slide, that mean time to respond or mean time to make restore, right? So on the same front, how do you consider that as a waste or agile in the context, if you can give your insight?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I also spoke about, and in my experience, what I've seen is tasks that are repetitive or manual in nature that can be automated, you know. I think it plays a big role. When we talk about mean time to restore, I think having those alerts and security mechanisms in place that will proactively inform the DevSecOps or the reliability team or reliability engineers to really take actions proactively. That would free them up from that constant headache of monitoring and, you know, upkeeping the applications or products. I hope that answered.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm Amit from Apexon. So as you covered in the last slide, right, mainly with respect to continuous integration and continuous deployment. So there are companies, right, you know, the leaders like Facebook, Netflix, and Amazon, right? They have a capability to do a daily deployment or, you know, multiple releases in a day. But let's say in a smaller project or in the service industry where we work, right? So in terms of reaching that nirvana state where the amount of effort it goes, right, to achieve that versus the delivery rate, or I would say, is it really worth for, you know, relatively medium size or a slightly, you know, bigger project, right? So how do we balance that, and what should be the boundary or a limit? So, I mean, if you can share your experience on that.
Yeah, Amit. So very valid, because what I have also seen and faced is that a lot of times production environments are not in your control. You might not have the rights to deploy in production, fix things in production directly, you know. So one of these questions came when, you know, I was discussing these KPI parameters with the team some time back. So then what we did is, rather than measuring them on production, we started measuring them on stage or SIT or UAT, whatever is in your control. What it really means is, how do you improve performance of the team that is working on it? Certain times, as I said, you know, you may not have that control on production environments. You might not have access to production environments. But then these parameters would still be indicative of how good a delivery team is performing. I hope that answered.
I'll repeat again. You talked about trust when, you know, when we are in an agile type of implementation. So the basic contract formulation also is a little different when we are in a pure agile environment. I mean, it's a fixed price or something different.
So that's a very good question. So I, in my experience, have also worked on a fixed price project with an agile approach. One of the instances, you know, where so we have a customer who does contracts with their end customers in a fixed cost model with a fixed timeline. But then our engagement with them is agile and T&M. So it is possible, as long as the customer has trust in the technical capabilities, you can adjust technical scope, leveraging the technical capabilities. You know, it is possible. How quickly you can have a working product delivered with an MVP or features that are really important to the customer. I think it matters the most. Contracts beyond a point, as I said, what I have felt is they are the last resort. Only in case of disputes do you go and refer contracts.
I just missed to say my name is Vivek Javani. I am from Dassault Systems India.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. Or I can also, you know, meet. Yeah.
First slide you said that waterfall is a costliest mistake. I think I beg to differ on here. The simple reason, if we look, waterfall started in 80s, right? 70s, 80s. And that was the time when we were having one release in 2 years.
Yes. Absolutely.
Contextually it was correct. In today's scenario, it could be wrong, but it's not the costliest mistake. I mean, I have differ on opinion
Sure.
out there.
Yeah.
Because if you look, still no organization, whatever you are into, whether you are into space exploration or oil exploration, there is always a hybrid approach. Pure agility might work in tech syntax, but if you look real engineering world, where real agility doesn't work for many reasons. Take example of space exploration, right? I've been working with ISRO. So now if you have to launch something, certain preparation has to happen with a waterfall. Certain execution slots within them can happen at agility pace. So, I mean, based on the environment, it works, but waterfall still works on many scenarios, and it is a need of our over there.
Absolutely. I think, yes. And I think you're right. What I was referring to was the 70s and 80s when people misunderstood the waterfall as a completely linear approach where there was no going back into a previous phase.
I like education is because if you look, education, it's always that this waterfall in a way. They don't teach you that when you are doing a design, still requirements can be changed. There is a possibility of a iteration, but that iteration is restricted. And still many organizations say they are agile, but they are doing a mini waterfall.
Sure. I think
In a context persists and works.
absolutely. I think major part of my career I worked on waterfall with an iterative approach. But then, if you look at data, even today, waterfall, even with an iterative approach, has 28 to 29% success rate, whereas agile has 68% success rate. So I don't say that one is better than the other, but then what really is different is the mindset with which people operate. So if there are any more questions, I think I can take them in the break as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chintan. We have next speaker, Dhaval.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dhaval Patel, a technical delivery lead at S&P Global. Today, I'm thrilled to take you on a journey through our remarkable experience on building scalable products. Join me as I talk about the challenges. As I talk about challenges, the triumphs and strategies that pave the path to success. I thank you, Chintan, for his session because he made my work little easier. He set the foundation and some of the things that he explained in the session, we might be touching upon. So when we hear S&P Global, I think the first thing that comes to our mind is the rating agency. And that's because of its media presence. But we are much more than that. We have multiple divisions in S&P Global, like ratings, mobility, commodity insights, Dow Jones indices, and one where I belong to, market intelligence. Within market intelligence, we create products which are for financial domains. So through our offerings, we provide analysis and insights of global financial markets. One of our flagship product is CIQ Pro, Capital IQ Pro, which is used by the investment bankers, wealth managers, private equity firms, academia, and many more. Think of this as a comprehensive desktop portal, just like Google Finance or Yahoo Finance, but much more complex, which has more depth and breadth in terms of the data points. So some of the data points that we provide or cover in this product is transactions, ownership, global supply chain, ratings, credit risk, right? Okay. All right. So not only the portal or the desktop, the data is also being shared through different other channels like mobile app, Excel plugin, APIs, direct access through Databricks, and many more. I hope this context will help you to understand and relate to the examples that I share in the following slides. With that, I would like to take you back in 2019. In 2019, teams at market intelligence used to follow Scrum Agile framework. We had over 150 teams, Scrum teams, where the average team size was 15. Notably, some of the teams were even bigger in size with 20 plus folks. We were following 4 weeks of sprint. Later, we also experimented with 3-week sprint. And we also had few additional roles in the Scrum team, like business analyst, UAT leads, apart from the regular roles like Scrum Masters, devs, QAs, right? The release frequency we used to follow was quarterly, which was a big monolithic release. Used to span like more than 12 hours over the weekend, right? So that was back in 2019. Now let me start with my first case study. So in the wake of the global pandemic, there was a need to show the COVID-19 data on the product, right? Everybody was interested in knowing what is the impact on the financial world because of COVID-19. So business had this project wherein they wanted to showcase the COVID-19 data on the product. Now, when you grow in numbers and you have multiple teams, you end up having specialized teams, right? So we had this front-end team who was specialized in creating the UI, new pages in the product, taking care of the configurations and access and everything related to the front end. And that team was dependent on another middle layer team whose job was to create the API and provide the data to the front end. For many of our data points, we do rely on open sources and vendors. So we had a vendor also in the picture who actually provided the data, and it was the data ingestion team's job to store that data in-house. Now, when you have data of such a scale, you have to have stronger and stricter data governance policies, right? That's where the database administrator or DBA teams comes into the picture. They work with the data ingestion team to ensure that data is stored in a right format, the data dictionaries are updated, and there is no duplication in terms of data in the entire database. Now, if you think of a startup kind of environment, this is more like a single person's job, right? Or at the max, one team's job. But when you look at this case study, we had 4 internal teams and we had 1 external vendor. So I'm sure all of you have worked in multiple projects, worked with multiple teams, multiple people. Can somebody help me with this? Like, do you sense any issues, any potential risk with this kind of operating culture? Yeah, dependencies. Yeah. So as you rightly identified, the key problems in this type of culture or environment rather is teams working in silos. You see there are 5 boxes, right? There are 5 different teams. Prioritization conflicts. Now when you have multiple teams, in this case, all these 4 internal teams were led by different business stakeholders. They had their own priorities, which might not align with each other, right? And as you rightly said, the cross-team dependencies. In this example, the API team had 4 APIs to be created in that release cycle. The COVID-19 related API was their 4th priority. Now imagine if they miss on that priority, the end goal of showing this COVID-19 data to customer is at risk, right? Because of the cross-team dependencies. Now, taking from Chintan's slide on waste, can somebody help me identify what kind of waste do you think are there in this environment? Right? Waiting, biggest. Your front-end team is waiting for your API team to deliver. Your API team is waiting on your data ingestion team to have the data ready, right? It leads to, not properly utilizing your resources on the most important priorities, right? Inventory. It might happen that there is an overproduction of good. Because of any reason, if we are not able to basically complete this feature, there might be partial deliveries. Some of the teams would have loaded the data or created the APIs, but the UI is not ready. Now, if you are working in this type of team, what do you think your sentiment would be? I mean, if you are a business stakeholder or a Scrum Master or you're part of the development team, what do you think your team sentiment would be? Will you be happy? Don't think so. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, the key takeaway here is working in silos and cross-team dependencies. They don't go very well when you are actually creating scalable products, right? Let me take you my second case study. Again, a simple one. I'm sure you would have similar experiences. So talking about the financial product, you can imagine that there would be multiple charts, right? Almost a chart in each of the pages. So because of the environment, because of the way we were working, we had a core capability team whose job was to kind of own the common components and do the maintenance and upgrade whenever required, right? So there was a core capability team who was owning a charting library, like a package, right? That was used by all the front-end teams. Because of the project requirements of front-end team A, for example, they wanted to upgrade this charting library so that they can leverage the latest features of that library and implement new requirements. They reached out to the core capability team asking them to do the upgrade. The core capability team did a quick analysis and a POC, and they were satisfied with the outcome. It was non-breaking. They went ahead and took that project. Now, the release cycle started, the package was upgraded, and team A started leveraging the latest feature. What happened later was team B, who was another dependent team on this package, right? Because this package is being used by multiple teams. They saw some discrepancies. Some of their mostly used charts, they started behaving differently. Because of this upgrade, they had some additional animations. And some of the manual configuration or customization that they had done on this package, they started breaking. This was a big deal for them because they were like the key charts that were used by 3 of their biggest clients. So then, obviously, if something of this sort happens, it follows by a lot of back and forth discussions, escalations. Why you did that? Why we were not involved earlier, right? Why can't you fix this? It is something that you have upgraded. Now it's your responsibility to fix it. Team A would say that, okay, but we don't know anything about your page, anything about your chart. How can we fix it, right? So those kind of things. Again, in this example, what do you think went wrong? Common vision, yeah. Exactly. Lack of alignment, right? Team A, Team B, they didn't know what they are doing. Team A had their own set of things, Team B had their own set of things. And actually they had different goals, right? Team A had new features to take care of. Communication gaps. There wasn't a clear communication on when things are going to be done, how it was going to be done, who was supposed to test, how much was the coverage and stuff like that. And if we talk about the defects, because of this poor handling of upgrade, there were defects reported by multiple teams on multiple areas. Access processing, another waste. Because there was an issue found, all the other teams had to do regression testing for all the charts, all the pages, to ensure that there are no bugs, and whatever bugs they found, they were to be fixed. Again, I'm sure the team sentiment here will also be not good, right? So obviously, acknowledging such inefficiencies and challenges, our management also decided to transform the way we were working, right? And the result was adopting SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework. Now, SAFe is not the option when it comes to scale, right? There are other options like LESS, large scale Scrum, SAS, Scrum at scale, DA, Discipline Agile, Nexus, and others. The key here is to do not ignore such signs. Whenever there is a need, it's important for management to acknowledge and take transformative actions to scale. And that's what we did. So it all started with a vision, a roadmap to pave the transformation. We onboarded a SAFe coach who created the roadmap, and we knew that learning was the cornerstone for this transformation, right? Transformation at such a scale requires learning at every level. It started with leaders because that's where the mindset change has to happen, and they are the one who can educate others, right? Throughout the learning, we did trainings, workshops, certification, and through that, there was a pool of internal trainers who emerged and who actually helped others to learn. Through internal meticulous assessments, we identified few trailblazing teams who were taken as a pilot to implement this SAFe framework. In parallel, we also ensured that some of the teams who were not so good in terms of following Agile, they were made sure that they have all the Agile ceremonies and everything in a better way, right? Because when you do not have your foundation solid, you cannot scale. So we had few teams wherein we had to work on ensuring that they utilize the daily stand-ups in a right way, or they conduct the retrospectives in a way which is fruitful for the team, right? So all that happened in parallel while the SAFe was launched for the pilot team, and then later on it was launched for the entire organization. It sounds like a small exercise, but this actually took 1.5 years, okay? And launch was just the beginning. What followed was the ongoing support. So we cultivated the community of practices wherein people collaborate and share knowledge with each other. We continue to have agility assessments and CI/CD, the continuous integration, continuous deployment assessments, identify the action items and make sure that team does that continuous integration. The result, we identified 8 value streams led by the solution train engineers. We had 25 agile release trains guided by the release train engineers. We had an army of 200 plus Scrum teams with more than 105 Scrum Masters, more than 170 product owners, which all worked hand in hand, right? And the team of 1400 plus devs and QAs, they actually fueled the journey. So what are the benefits, you may ask? You did this transformation, you spent like more than a couple of years. What is the benefit? The key benefit, some of the challenges we saw earlier, transparency and alignment. This helped the leaders to connect with all the members in the organizations, right? Some of the ceremonies of SAFe, say for example, PI planning, that's where everybody gets together. The business stakeholders get a chance to talk to people, people get a chance to hear from them, to learn about their vision, their roadmap, right? Team also got the visibility to understand how their delivery is actually making value, adding value to the business. It also helped us implementing that early feedback loop. Every sprint, the working product was being showcased to the stakeholders and the feedback was kind of shared. The next one is better planning and risk mitigation. Because teams were made aware of each other's plan, now we don't have a situation like, okay, team A didn't know what team B is doing, right? They're part of the same value stream, so they are all made aware of each other's plan. Something that we adopt and follow religiously is roam board, risk roaming, right? It provides that proactive opportunity to identify risks. We ensure that everybody spends time on that during the PI planning, so that the risks and dependencies are called out in advance and mitigation plans are created. We also set up work in progress limits based on individual teams' maturity, and that's also being tracked. Improved quality. We also gave a lot of emphasis on NFRs, non-functional requirements, and they were in fact made part of the acceptance criteria. So the story or the work is not done until and unless that is met. Dedicated focus and effort was given on test automation, and basically to mature our CI/CD practices. And the intention was to kind of decouple the deployment and the release process. All in all, it helped in having better communication, making decisions faster, and streamlining the operations, which helped us having faster time to market, right? I mean, it sounds like a rosy story, but obviously all the transformations has its own challenges. We also had some of the challenges. This slide talks about some of the key challenges, hurdles that we overcame, and which helped us becoming more resilient and more mature organization. Some of these challenges might be overlooked when we think of or when we plan for a large scale transformation. First one, role and job title alignment. I mean, doesn't sound like a big issue, but it was indeed. Remember, we had roles like business analyst, UAT leads, which are not part of Scrum as such, but we still had it because of the legacy reasons. When we implemented SAFe, we decided to implement in a true manner, and that's where we took a decision to kind of get rid of some of those roles and titles, which made some of those positions redundant. People with 15 plus of experience, they were given titles like Scrum Masters, which they were not happy with. Scrum is also very heavy framework in terms of facilitation, right? So these Scrum Masters and RTs, they're full-time job. It takes a different set of mind to kind of do that job, right? That was one of the challenges we encountered. The second one, longer events for global teams. We do have global teams, like teams working in almost all the time zones. Majority of our folks are in US, APAC region, also in Europe and like the Australian time zone, right? It was really difficult for us to find out a common slot for longer ceremonies, like PI planning, which takes 2 full days. It's practically very challenging to have 2 full days from all the people. So which resulted into gradual decrease in the attendance and also loss in some of these, the value loss in some of these ceremonies. Shorter sprint window. So we initially were following 4 weeks and 3 weeks of sprint. After this transformation, we started following 2 weeks sprint. Some of the teams really struggled. They were initially not able to cope up with that because it takes time for team to understand how to split the work vertically and have smaller chunks of work which can be delivered and incrementally show the value. On the similar lines, some of the teams really struggled with the long-term planning. For some of the business stakeholders, it was really difficult to just give the priority for the upcoming quarter or couple of quarters. Similarly, teams also faced challenges on balancing between the priorities of the current work, I mean, delivering on the current PI work, and also doing some work ahead research estimation on the upcoming PI. Tools. Again, this is one of those things which generally people kind of overlook. So with this new way of working, it required new set of tools. We required tools to collaborate digitally with a larger audience, right? We adopted a tool called Miro or Miro. We also adopted some of the tools like Actionable Agile Analytics, which does all the assessments and helps us creating the action plans. Procuring licenses and ensuring that all the folks in the team who requires read or edit access is a big task. And initially there were some delays because of that. Lastly, when we adopted SAFe, everybody just went with the flow. Okay? So even some of the teams who were mainly doing support, they also took SAFe. And I mean, I also heard one of the HR team who said, we are also in SAFe now, right? So everybody, irrespective of the nature of their work, started following it. So what? Our agility, our journey did not end when we adopted SAFe. The journey towards agility continues. We continue the COPs, the community of practice, ongoing coaching, and providing support to the teams. The team maturity assessments and improvement plans plays a big role in our continuous learning and support journey. We also allowed teams to do experiments, explore what is best for them, make tweaks which works for them, right? So challenge that I explained, like the PI planning. Some of the teams, some of the arts, they experimented breaking down that to 3 or 4 days, having some of the activities which is, some of the activities in the closer teams. Teams were given flexibility to address the BAUs or the support task the way they felt is most suitable for them. The split between the different value areas like architecture or business or tech debt, that also was kind of asked team to experiment and find out what works best for them. And some of the teams who took up SAFe, like the support teams, they eventually took up Kanban or some other mechanism because they just realized that that's not working best for them. Along with that, we continue to take fact-based decisions, and that's where the dashboard really helps. And these dashboards are not for senior management or not used by just the top folks of the organization. These dashboards are used by everybody in the team. What we did was we created 2 templates, one at team level, one at the art level. And then again, everybody in the, all the arts, all the teams had flexibility to add or remove stuff which they feel they don't need. The essence here was that everybody looks at these dashboards on daily basis or at least, twice a week, where they had the team charter. Everybody knew what we are supposed to do, what is our core strength. Whenever somebody new joins in the team, they know the history about the team, working agreement, when do we do what, how do we do what. They had all the key metrics about the team, about the goals, priorities, everything on the board. Similarly, at the art level, obviously it had a roster of the team, team and the art leads and all the feature analysis about how many features are taken in the current PI versus next PI. They're split by size, by team, values and stuff like that. The intention here was to give the consistent picture to everyone. That way they can connect to the goals, they can also understand how they are adding values. So with that, I would like to conclude. And the key takeaway here is, whenever there is a need, whenever you feel a need to scale, we do not ignore that, okay? Things that helped us was agility, adaptability, and the transformative power of SAFe. So that really helped. With that, I would like to thank all of you for your time and attention. Open for questions.